Om Bachum Yatsham Atmani Tam Yacha Budao Diyam Yacha Cha Buddhi Sakshini Tam Chapi Purnatmani Nirvikalpe Vilapya Shantim Paramam Bhajasva Om Shantihi Shantihi Shantihi. That blissful practitioner of sweet dissolution, discriminating wisely, joins the word to the mind, mind to the intellect to the ego to the witness to the Atman, and the Atman to Brahman. Brahman is the soul in all. In this way, does that fortunate practitioner enjoy eternal peace and ecstatic bliss. Om peace, peace, peace. Om yo brahmanan vidadati purvam yo vai vedanscha prahino hi tasmai tam chapi atmabudhi prakasha mumukshurvai sharnam ham prapadje. Om shantihi shantihi shantihi. That formless presence, out of which sprang the Trinity at the beginning of a cosmic cycle, and who gifted the Vedas unto Lord Brahma, who is the eternal bridge to immortality, who is partless, faultless, actionless and divine. Who resembles fire that has consumed all its fuel. I go for refuge to that one, the Supreme Brahman, who is light, reflects the Atman, and draws the attention of mankind inwardly. Om peace, peace, peace. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karvavahai Tejasvi Navaditamastu Ma Vidvishovahai. Om Shantihi Shantihi Shantihi. May Brahman, the reality, protect us, and may Brahman sustain us. May Brahman illumine our thinking consciousness. May we not find fault with each other, with the world, or with the teachings, and may what we study be a source of inspiration to us eternally. Om peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us, and may peace be unto all. Om Hari Om. So today in our newer location, broadcasting still from the Big Island during this time of travel restrictions, and trying to reach out to all manner of persons, but of course particularly to those ones who have some sort of lasting interest in in the Dharma. Hard word to define, but how to live a divine life would be how it would work out in any given person's human existence, even over a series of lifetimes. So we reach out to people to try and pay everything forward from all of the deeds that have been accumulated from the past lifetimes. Something we don't often think about, but which is a part of our makeup in this lifetime, day to day. As Vivekananda said, we're wearing our karma on our features, our prarabdha karma, that's called. So it's a good study to look in the mirror and look at oneself and take stock of what one sees and modify when one doesn't like and accent what one does. Bring out the klista vrittis and destroy them, and then abide with the aklista vrittis, the positive vibrations of the mind. And here during the Holy Mother days, that is Navaratri having just passed us, and now we have Kali Puja and Lakshmi Puja. So a whole series of October, November holy dates. Divine Mother lovers love to worship on those days and think about her especially. Quite like a new year for spiritual devotees, particularly for Shaktas, or worship of dynamic power. Because that Brahman that I just chanted about is not that easily attainable. It rather like its concomitant, its equal, Shakti, disappears behind the scenes. The scenes are called Maya, or phenomena, appearances. So the devotee tries to assume appearances amidst appearances. That is, put on that face of serious practice and penetrate through appearances of Maya to uncover the Shakti power behind. That may start out by a person actually becoming aware of their prana. Man does not live by bread alone, lives by this inner energy. And that prana doesn't come just from food either. That's one of the outer causes or effects of a cause, food. And it comes from interior prana. Psychic prana was called by Swami Vivekananda when he came here. And many of us have been studying the bridges, like I've been calling it lately, the three-storied house of three floors you walk through, from the elements to the five senses to the five tanmatras. It's a kind of Vedanta 101 teaching which started back in the times of Lord Kapila when he came through with the Samkhya system. And so one would have to practice this subject of today's class called Viveka early on in life. Hopefully it's brought out by your parents. It's very unlikely it's going to be accented by the society you're born in, at least in this age. Dharma is pretty specific. That word, Sanskrit of course, is specific to India. So if we want to go looking for something that can take us beyond morality with the problem of its opposite, immorality, or virtue with its opposite, vice, then we're probably going to have to go towards something that is of a deep teaching nature, that is a transmission from beings who have practiced their sadhana and realized a certain level of realization through this very self-same practice. Discrimination is a loaded word, sort of like God is a loaded word here in the West. So we have to, if we're Vedantists or Buddhists or Sufis, or because these are the three kinds of movements in Tibetan Buddhism and so forth, who are specifically concerned with Dharma and practice right now of a deep kind that looks past appearances of things and into like rebirth, birth, life and death and rebirth, which is one of the things I'll go through in exploring the word Viveka, which is of course the namesake of our Swami Vivekananda, who brought this great darshana of Vedanta to us in 1893, and again brought it back and looked over it in 1902. He was here twice in the West. So it takes a special kind of looking inward and penetrating through appearances then for a person to become successful in spiritual life and to uncover these wisdom teachings inside of oneself. All knowledge lies within you is a yogic saying. It's much like the Christian saying of the kingdom of heaven is within you. The kingdom of heaven just isn't lands with pleasures and various things, but we would interpret that in Vedanta as that which is rich with fruits of wisdom that you should be bringing back every lifetime and remembering with your divine memory called smriti. If we were to sing it, and sitting up as I am this week, a little bit more difficult to do so, but Ya Devi Sarvabhuteshu Neti-Neti Abhidhyate Namastasyai 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 Namo Namah. Ya Devi Sarvabhuteshu Smriti Rupena Samstita Namastasyai 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 Namo Namaha. Ya Devi Sarvabhuteshu Buddhi Rupena Samstita Namastasyai 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 Namo Namaha. Ya Devi Namo Namaha. Ya Devi Namo Namaha. Ya Devi Namo Namaha. Ya Devi Namo Namaha. Divine Mother, you exist as consciousness in the hearts and minds of all beings. Salutations to you. O Divine Mother of the Universe, you exist as retentive memory in the hearts and minds of all beings. Salutations unto you. O Divine Mother of the Universe, as living intelligence you exist in the hearts and minds of all beings. Salutations, salutations, salutations unto thee. With verses like that then, as I was saying earlier, then you come to know about Divine Mother reality and how everything flows out from that. This you have a right to know about. Brahman, you'll have to make some special effort to know about that, because not many people, if you think about it, in the world are very much attracted to formlessness. Life is all about form and name and action. And when you engage in action, of course, you cause effects to happen, good, bad, and mixed. So you're there in the midst of Maya, and you have to find out some way to keep it at arm's length. Know it and watch it from a distance, as Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa used to say. Don't go up close and study it or get into it and wrap yourself in it like a silkworm and bind yourself, but always keep distant from it. And in lifetime to lifetime you can keep this retentive memory that the Chandi is singing about, Divine Mother Scripture. Smriti Rupena, so it's the very form of memory. Smriti Rupena Samstita, steady in the hearts and minds of all beings. So she exists as retentive memory inside of your heart, inside of your mind, all the time. And so your mind is falling out of remembrance of that. And that's the opposite of remembrance, is forgetfulness. So if you can remember Divine Mother, and if you can remember her teachings, and if you drive them deep into your mind all the time and contemplate them, manana, roll them over in your mind, give a lifetime to that, then they'll probably stick. As Sri Ramakrishna said, snowfall doesn't stick on a wet road, but it'll cause a snowbank in dry land. So we have to dry out the nadis, the minds, our minds, and probably not only our conscious mind, but work on our subconscious mind too, and get rid of dry up the wetness of worldliness, and so that everything that we do sticks inside of us. When we start into spiritual life, we'll have accumulation rather than diminution or forgetfulness. Lord Buddha, which we'll look at some of his teachings today too, called that drops in the Dharma bucket. So there'll be drops falling all around you like snowflakes or rain, but you can't catch any of them, or very many of them, with your two hands. So you get a bucket and make sure it's out all the time when the rain of grace is happening. Because there are times in human life, as you know, because of gunic cycles and karmic cycles and cycles with your ancestors and various things that are going on, cycles of work and rest and going on in human life, which makes auspicious times very rare and very difficult of access. Maybe even to recognize that they're upon you. See, it'd be like, oh, it's snowing. You see, oh, it's raining. You have to look out and see that, and then go gather under that period, that auspicious period, and then once you have something, you tend it and grow it. Part of this class today, Viveka, the subtitle is Separating the Wheat from the Chaff. So we know this power of Viveka, the discrimination between the real and the unreal. As I just said, discrimination, takes us toward thinking about racism or not when we're here in the West in this particular time. But in spiritual circles, and when they're using that Sanskrit word, Viveka, it means a discrimination between what is real and what is unreal. And the unreal in that case isn't something necessarily that's outright illusion, because even Vivekananda said that even Maya has a certain reality. It's not really unreal in the sense of a mirage in the desert. It has a statement of fact in your life. It's real as long as you're there, and it's unreal as soon as you abandon it, or it abandons you. That's called Srishti Stiti Vada. That is, if you see it, Srishti, it might as well be real to you. But you can also make it disappear. It actually does disappear in deep sleep and in a good meditation, the time of passing. And in samadhi, if you're so fortunate enough to know what that is and can invite samadhi, make yourself prepared for samadhi. Usually happens more readily through introduction of yourself to a great soul. See, a great soul would be like we have our devotion to Sri Ramakrishna, you see. Paramahamsa Siddha Yogi, Paramahamsa Siddha Yogi, Raho Pranam Namaskar, Paramahamsa Sri Ramakrishna, Paramahamsa Sri Ramakrishna, Laho Pranam Namaskar. So if you're introduced to a great soul like Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, which we have been in this lifetime through our teachers, and of course they through Swami Vivekananda and 16 direct disciples, Brahmanandam, Shivam, Shantam, Premanupam, Niranjanam, Yogisham, Adbhutam, Nityam, Akhanda Advaita Lakshinam, 8. Vijnanam, Triguna Titam, Turyabedam, Samgitam, Subodham, Shardam, Chaiva, Viveka Shashi Bhushanam, 16. A great chant that a Swami from a different order of the Ramakrishna order composed. So you see that beings in other lineages in India were looking at this spiritual phenomena of Sri Ramakrishna with 16 disciples, Holy Mother at his side, and Swami Vivekananda jumping the ocean and bringing these teachings to us. You see what a profound thing that is. So I don't really have to labor the point, do I? So if you've learned from a soul named Swami Vivekananda, then you've got the definition of that word in your very teacher's name. You're not likely to forget it, you see. You're not apt to forget it. So so the word then has to be specified in English as meaning discrimination between what is changing and what is unchanging. What's non-eternal and what's eternal. What's essential and what's non-essential. You can go beyond real and unreal because that throws people quite often. Unreal, what do you mean? See. Illusory, do you mean all this is a dream? Yes, we mean a lot of that. And we can explain it to you as the need arises in Vedanta. Vedanta can answer every question that religion has. I haven't found one it can't answer in my time with it in this lifetime alone. And so one just needs to ponder it and arm oneself with it, bolster oneself up with it, and try and bring it into life too. Vivekananda said you didn't want to leave it in churches and temples as it's been done in the past. It's okay there, but when it comes time that people are suffering in a mass way, and they're suffering ignoble things that are unnecessary, as the Srimad Devi Bhagavatam says, it's Divine Mother says it's kind of understandable, she says, that people will suffer in an age like a Kali Yuga from the impositions of time and duration. But she says it's not understandable at all that people should suffer evil actions from evil beings. She won't allow that. So you have to then use the Dharma to destroy the Adharma, which the Avatar is coming all the time to do that. And age to age, I embody myself forth. Yuge, cha, dharmasha. So the Dharma is very important in India. Like I say, it's a word specific to India. You won't find it anywhere else. And it'd be a stretch to try and find an equivalent to it in other religions, what we really mean by it. And there's Dharma and there's Adharma, but then there's Swadharma too. There's even a higher Dharma Krishna talks about in the Gita, that once you learn the Dharma, you use that as a springboard to get beyond just Dharmic life into things like freedom, liberation, and formlessness, which we were talking about, which is another unique thing to India, I think. When we say India, we're talking about a host of paths and darshanas, not just one book or one religion, but many of each, and many great teachers, many avatars. And so in that way then, Viveka becomes an important word to us, a watchword. And so that's why in this 4 weeks coming up, including this Sunday, today, we're going to look at Viveka. And I have it that I want to look at Viveka first under the scope of its own meaning. Then we'll pass on to some teachings that will look at Viveka as pertains to truth. Then we'll look at Viveka as pertains to philosophy. And then we'll look at Viveka as pertains to birth, life, death, and rebirth. That's a very important facet. I actually have more charts about that than the others. Because I think it's pertinent to today's day and time that this divine memory that Viveka is so famous for uncovering in you, if you sharpen that sword and hone it, keep it sharp, and use it in life, then ignorance isn't going to descend on you over 70, 80, 90, 100 years lifetime. If you should be so fortunate, or as the case may be, so unfortunate as to live that long. 50 years is pretty much it. For Shankara and Vivekananda, it was 30 some will do. I'll be able to accomplish everything in that time, and then spit out the body. I spat out the body, Vivekananda said, after he passed to one of his brother monks, appeared to him and said, I've spat out the body. So it's inconsequential. You just keep it as a temple of God and so forth, keep it clean so that this prana can flow through it, and you can make the steps and connections back to the prana and to the psychic prana. That your thoughts will flow evenly. Your mind will expand in its capacity to know Brahman. And of course, one of the famous peace chants. So, I want to read to you something then to start out the class about Viveka and how it was taught to the mind-born sons of Lord Brahma. There's a mind-born son named Lord Vashishta, and SRV put out this quintessential Yoga Vashishta, some of the great stories that the Lord Vashishta, one of the 10 mind-born sons of Brahma, utilized to try and bring the young avatar, Sri Ram, out of his encounter with Maya when he went outside the palace walls of his father, just like Buddha was to do several thousand years later. Ram and Buddha have that very close connection to each other, and not just in consciousness, but in the scenes of their life, born to rich kings and families that were lords and at the height of their power and so forth, and then leaving the palace and finding suffering outside and wanting to bridge that gap and help life forms that were suffering unnecessarily in most cases. And it wasn't just politics and spread of wealth and money and all that. The caste system was already fairly effective at doing that, but it didn't stop the fact that suffering comes in life. First noble truth, right? So, I mean, if I were sitting here and I was going to teach you Buddhism, then instead of this chart here, I would have the four noble truths and eightfold path. If I was going to teach you Lord Kapil's Sankhya, I would have the 24 cosmic principles. If I was going to teach you Kashmiri Shaivism, I would have the 36 cosmic principles. If I was going to teach you yoga, I'd have the 10 yamas and niyamas. If I was going to comment on Judaism, I'd have the 10 commandments, and so forth and so on. So if I'm going to comment on Vedanta with its key teaching of Viveka, Vairagya, there's 3 V's. Vedanta and its Viveka Vairagya, then you would have this sadhana chatushtaya up, first of all, to show. And something that you would want to look at, I would say every month, at least, if not every year. Every year, once a year with your teacher, yes, but every day, if you want to keep prompting your mind towards Dharma. Things that get in the way, like work and family affairs and making of money and rest. Any avenue of that allows for complacency or inaction, unless you're very adept at inaction, then would warrant a continual study of the Dharma daily to keep those forces at bay. And so you can remain in an even state of mind all the time. Smriti rupena ya samstita namastasyai ya devi ya devi. So she exists as memory, and I sang also as living intelligence, buddhi rupena samstita. The Lord Buddha named himself after that. I am awakened. I am the Buddha. So I wanted to read you a little bit out of one of those great lords. That is, a mind-born son is an interesting expression. We don't have anything like it, well, in any other religion. So if there's such a word in Sanskrit as mind-born son, then you know that some great beings had birthed beings in subtle bodies out of their own mind, like the power of their third eye. There's a story in the Upanishads and in the Tantras where the gods wanted to envision the Divine Mother, so they each got together and light came out of their third eye, and they thought of the Divine Mother, and each of the gods contributed something to her form. She's already formless. They knew that. They wanted her in form so they could see her. So each of the gods contributed something. Weapons, flowers, dress, jewelry, everything just to make this perfect, beautiful Divine Mother Goddess so they could gaze upon her and that she could help them defeat powerful enemies. So that's the idea of a mind-born thing. It's in an inner realm, it's happening. You don't see it that much out here. However, if you look into the Yoga Sutras, you'll see that great teachers make sons and daughters out of their students. So you have a new birth when you come to a teacher, and you have a new name, you have a new life, you have a new direction. And and you have a new mantra, you have a new thing to say, rather than just the commonplace things that run you around in circles in society and keep you stuck in the samsaric wheel. So you have all that new. That's your new birth, so you're twice born. You might as well call yourself twice born. That's I've had a new birth, and so in that way, that can happen to you after you're already born. See, like Tripura Sundari, if you're in the world, and then you take initiation, then you go to the first of three worlds that are part of the goddesses, Tripura Sundari, and you get the image, and you get the mantra, the sound. You get all these things from your guru that put you in. You're still in this world physically, as your body is still, as it were, in this world. But now another world is open to you, and you've got 2 feet, like a foot in both. And very soon you take the foot out of the physical world, and it doesn't exist for you anymore. See? Only the spiritual world exists for you. And you can still be participating in the physical world, and it's changed. In other words, it's shown up its appearance to you as being unreal. And so some discrimination came along with that as you selected a guru. Not Aviveka guru, Viveka guru. So many people are selecting wrong gurus. See, they're not using honed discrimination and intelligence to check into this person who's going to guide them in spiritual life. That's a very important thing. Don't you check out the best dentists and the best doctors and the best lawyers and so forth in this world to try and find those who can do right by you, do best by you, and then not to think that if you go into spiritual life you can just choose any fool or some spurious person off the beach or a hitchhiker or something. I've heard it happening. Picking up a hitchhiker and say, "Oh, I'll give you initiation," the person said to one of my students. So this discrimination comes forward if you're fortunate enough, and probably not just fortunate, but if you've invited it, you've opened up to it. There has to be 2 things that happen: the grace of God and your own opening to it. If those 2 are put together, like 2 wings of the bird, then you have an authentic start to a real spiritual life. Otherwise, there's a lot of fits and starts, a lot of false starts going on. Oh, I think I'm going to quit that, fall back, you see. And there's many reasons for that, not persevering. But if you find an authentic teacher like we have, and then there's really no reason to go the distance and wake up from ignorance for all time and never even have to worry about entertaining it again. It's not like, oh, should I go back again? You know, you wouldn't lick up the spittle you spat out on the sidewalk half a minute ago, would you? So that's how Sri Ramakrishna put it. So you wouldn't even think of going back to that old world, that old way of thinking, that old body, that old way of speaking. Because you've got new body, spiritual body. You've got a mantra, you've got a teacher now, worthy teacher and so forth. What kind of a fool would give all this up and go back, you see? So one of the problems of today's age, when you're not enforced with the Dharma when you're first born to parents. None of us were. There were some of us were fortunate enough to have some moral parents, and maybe a few with a little bit more universal understanding going on, instead of being tied into the conventional run of things. But that's even rare. So in the case of Lord Vasishtha, he was the mind-born son of the Trinity. Lord Brahma thought in his head and came up with 10 mind-born sons. And remember, this happens on a very deep level. If you don't believe in deep levels, then you better start opening up channels to it if you want a spiritual life. Otherwise, you just stay out here. Can you really live a spiritual life out here? This is all matter out here. And if you don't have those inroads made, nadis, and you haven't opened them up, and you can't abide in them, that's part of what meditation is, and it's what contemplation is, and it's what thinking about the teachings is all about. It's what saying the mantra is all about, is all inward, you see. And so you have to open up those passageways to that have been closed for a long time. And all of a sudden you're living inside. You're in the second city of Tripura Sundari, and you've taken refuge there for all time, and ignorance is gone, gone, utterly gone. I woke up one day, my ignorance was gone, gone, utterly gone, the song in India sings. Because why? Because who can veil the truth? See, when you begin to open up it, the truth is standing right behind all appearances, and it flashes at you. And once you've caught even a glimpse of that, it's like the game is over. The house of cards is tumbling down, and it's the straw that broke the camel's back, that is the camel of Maya, all these constructs. And now you're left with your past conditionings, see, what you used to think things consisted of. Those are beginning to fall apart. You see people in shock. I've seen people in shock by hearing the truth. I was teaching one person, it was actually kind of funny and scary at the same time, teaching one person when I was teaching Vedanta in prisons. And one person came up to me after hearing the Vedanta and said, "You mean to say that all of my life has been a lie? And you're telling me the truth now for the first time?" And he was angry that he had been fooled for so long under the wool, pulled over his eyes, by people who didn't even know how to pull wool. You see, parents, society, upbringing, teachers, education, military, politics. The wool gets thicker and thicker as you go along. So one person comes along and says, "Oh, pardon me for a second, do you mind?" Strip, you see. And you get this glimpse. "Oh, you're quite not ready for that yet? Put it back on, see. Let's wait a while, see. But you can't forget that view you had when the teacher took off the veil of wool from your eyes for the first time. And it'll affect your life even if you don't immediately wake up. It's like waking up anytime you're kind of groggy, right? And when you were a kid and so forth. When you're older and you're more yogically developed, you don't know what sleepiness is. You just rest the body, eyes open, you get up. There's no grogginess anymore in you. No sleepiness, no tamas, no lassitudinousness. You've got the insomnia of yoga. So, eyes open, eyes closed, it doesn't matter. God exists both ways, Holy Mother said. And a lot of that is due to the thanks then of your own opening. And in Vedanta, that opening is made possible in a huge way, like with a sword of discrimination, by Viveka itself. And so Lord Brahma called one of his mind-born sons one day to him, Vashishta. He said, I want to conduct an experiment on you, see. I'll give you the story really quickly and then read you the part about this. It segues us into the chart. So it won't take long. I'll tell you the story. So Vashishta said, well, sure. He said, so sit down here on this northern petal. So, this is an inner land, a most esoteric, secret land that most people don't know about. 1,000-petaled lotus, they call it. And don't worry about depth and width and height and mass and weight and breadth. That all goes away in the intelligent particle. In your mind, it goes into a dream, right? So the form disappears and the subtle form comes. Your outer senses disappear, your inner senses take over. It's just like passing into heaven or into a dream. So there's none of that old baggage anymore, that weight, see. So inside, deep inside, then there's this 1,000-petaled lotus upon which the Lord sits when it's time to bring out the seeds and spread them for a whole nother cycle, of billions of years long cycle. Lord Brahma's day is 1 billion years long, and his night is another 1 billion years long. So time is nothing there. And it's like the sun god here is granting us our flood of days. Day after day goes by, day after day, night after night. Sun, as we revolve around it, standing there in the sky, and it's almost timeless when you think about it. When you're not pulled into the restlessness of the world and so forth, and you're just observing it from a yogic standpoint, it's just like time might as well have gone away right now. Avadhut sings about that. He says how sunrise in the morning, sunset at night, I don't see any difference. Day after day comes, I don't see any difference. So this is how hard it is for me to tell a story. So, sit down on one of the petals of my lotus. So Lord Brahma is sitting on this 1,000-petal lotus. Sit here on this petal. And he put his hand on, trying to get on with this, put his hand on the Lord's head, Lord Vashishta's head, his son, his mind-born son, and uttered a curse with these seed words, you see. Their blessings are also curses out there possible. For on all levels. So Vashishta immediately went into Maya. He put the curse of Maya on him. And so Vashishta immediately lost his center. And he began to feel horrible. His natural state of mind all the time is peace. You have to understand. This is a very high level of being. So he never loses his peace of mind and his balance and his bliss that goes with it. So to have this all of a sudden happen to him, he's just frightened. He can't understand what happened to him. So while he's in this confused condition, Lord Brahma asks him some questions, you see. It really reminds us of Sri Ramakrishna asking Swami Vivekananda questions when he was just a young boy, putting him into a trance and asking him, who are you, where did you come from? Penetrating through the young Naran's defenses that have already beginning to mount in society. And just with a touch, you see, like on the head. We saw Krishna do that to Arjuna in the battlefield. We hear about it being done here with yoga, with Brahma and Vashishta. We've heard about it in the case of Ramakrishna and Swamiji now. So this is a Shakti power. So anyway, ask him these questions while he's in this state, and then he takes the state away with another mantra. Then Vashishta is his old self again. He goes, what did you do to me? And he said, well, you're going to have to go to Earth in your next incarnation. We've determined that you have to go to Earth, and so I want you to know what it feels like to be a human being. And how much they suffer in the body. And And so if you have that innate feeling of what it's like, then it'll increase your compassion, and you'll be able to remain there in the body. It's sort of like when Sri Ramakrishna passed, he told Holy Mother, said, "I'd like to go too," and he said, "No, you cannot. You must stay here, but I'll give you a few things to hang on to." So she had to steel herself, you see, to stay after her beloved had left the body, and stay there for many more decades. And so it's rather like that. So then Vasishtha goes on with his discourse to him after awakening him out of this curse of Maya, and he says, basically, that in his answer to Vasishtha's question about why it has happened to him, he says, "You should know that there are many persons there on earth who apathetically submerge themselves in the mire of Maya, as unseemly as that sounds. These will not listen to you when you come to earth. Nor should you waste your time upon them. Seek out those who seek you out, and only give these aspiring souls, and those souls with sincerity, this precious initiation which I have invested you with at birth. In other words, my son, to those who have qualified themselves by gaining the incomparable sadhana chatushtaya, the 4 qualifications in attaining liberation, to them you may transmit these precious teachings. To those who languish and malinger, you must not do so." In short, that's basically what I wanted to read, but couched in that story. So, if we looked at the sadhana chatushtaya, which is warming us up to this subject of Viveka, so important. I've often told you before that if you look at Vedanta, it's really hard to find any kind of practice. You know, I mean, think about your own time with Vedanta, how you've read Vedantic books and texts and Upanishads. It's not telling me to do anything, really. It's just stating what is. It's also stating what isn't. I mean, the contrast is important. You should know who you are, but you can't just say, who am I, who am I, who am I over again. You have to know what you're not in order to know who you are. So what you're not is a lot of things. And those lots of things are what people think they are. See? So this is why Lord Brahma is telling his son, when you go there, you'll find a lot of people just in the mire, thinking themselves to be things like a body full of filth, or the 5 elements which are constantly in flux, or the 5 senses which are always going outward and attaching to objects. I mean, who in their right mind would attach to these things when they know themselves, or when they want to know themselves even? Who would waste time on them? Malinger, the word there, you see. Waste your time. So sadhana chatushtaya means basically 4. Chatushtaya means basically 4. So it means 4, I like to put it, the 4 treasures. And then the 3rd treasure has 6 jewels in it. So the 4 treasures and the 6 jewels, basically it's like the 4 noble truths to Buddhism. You've got this, and as I was just saying, you know, it's a mental practice then. It's one of the only semblances of a practice you can find in Vedanta. If you want practice, go to yoga, of course. Or even Samkhya has, although that's pretty much a statement of fact too about unreal things. Vedanta is a statement of fact about real things, and yoga kind of falls in the middle there as a way to practice. So you've got Samkhya, Yoga, and Vedanta are these 3 great steps, and we've had a chart on that, studied that before in the past recently. The 3 great steps in India is pretty much Samkhya, Yoga, and Vedanta. if you're looking at the Vedic side of things. And then you've got probably some other steps along the Tantric side and some other steps along the Buddhist side, like the Hinayana, Mahayana, Vajrayana kind of steps. So in this, and we've gone through it so many times, but I'm presenting this as a way of introducing Viveka as Viveka, what it's supposed to do. And so you see there, Shankara says, the sages have spoken of 4 qualifications for spiritual attainment: deep discrimination between the eternal and the non-eternal, renunciation of the fruits of action, acquiring the 6 jewels, and longing for liberation. When these 4 are present, devotion to reality succeeds. When they are absent, it will fail. So devotion to reality is something that's already a given, isn't it? It's something that you're stepping up trying to realize, not something that you have to gain somehow. See, Vedanta is already telling you that your devotion to reality should be intact all the time. It should never have been tampered with by anything or anyone, including parents and society and so forth, or worldly conventions. So they always present things in that way, sort of like Zen Buddhism. So they just, this is the fact here, now measure up to it. It's not like create this and then grow into it, and in fact the only other default zone you could accept is remember it. I've forgotten it. They'll allow for that. Forgetfulness is half the battle, and remembrance is half the victory. So if you can just, when you remember, you say, I remember that it is, right? You're not saying, I remember that I've got to create it anew. See, that's becoming, and that's the veil everyone's operating under out there. I'm going to get, I'm going to become, I will secure that. And Krishna talks about it in the Gita too. These are mechanisms of the mind, trying to get things, will, mind, ego, trying to gain something that's already theirs, or should be seen as already belonging to you. So that's what forgetfulness engenders in you, is a kind of idea that I've lost it, I have to gain it back, rather than it is, and I should just remember it. And that's called non-duality, basically, or Advaita. So if you have a problem with remembrance, then she'll give you a sword. It's the sword of discrimination. Maybe we can look at that chart another week. Shankara has a beautiful description of it in the Viveka Chudamani. So you see there that cognizing the distinction between the real and the unreal, or as the quote there said from Shankara, between the eternal and the non-eternal, would be a key for you. I see that's not lasting anymore. It's not in my life anymore. It didn't last. That relationship, that bank account, that job, whatever it is, whatever that it is, it's a that with a lowercase. It's not the that with the uppercase, which means Brahman. So I see that all that passes and changes again and comes around again, passes again, and then I'm always having to adopt. It's like trying to live in shifting sands, Christ said, instead of on bedrock. So you see enough experience with that, which you usually don't get when you're young, in this particular day and age, then you try for more solid footing. You're tired of dancing and trying to keep your balance. Yoga is balance. So yoga as union is balance. Yoga and practice is trying to regain your balance. All on the foundation of Brahman, that is the backdrop to everything that's stationary. It's not spinning like a world. It's not changing like jobs or relationships or families from birth to death. It's the only stationary thing you have to depend upon. You don't have to dance on it. You can come to pafaft, as I was just saying. It's pure, actionless, and divine. So actionless means, there's no movement going on in it. it pervades everything, so you can't go looking for it. You have to stop like it is. It's like trains, right? The father of yoga and said if trains are moving at the same speed, 3 trains are moving the same speed along the track, looks like everyone's stationary. But one goes a little slower and one goes a little faster, all of a sudden you see that there's variance there, there's difference. But so Brahman is no tracks, no train. Yoga is 3 trains going the same speed. So once you come to that kind of stationariness, which they're advising to you, then there's no more fear of losing balance anymore. But Advaita is very good at explaining that in his songs. So that's Viveka, basically. And they say about Viveka that Adhyaropa and Apavada are its 2 concomitants. That is, recognizing that there's change, and then refutation of the misconception that change is real. Very simple, really, but very profound too. It's not like people can just automatically take this. See, it'd be like having to adjust to mountain height on a hike. Each 1,000 feet you go up. You can go out here in Mount Alo over there in one of our volcanoes and take a mule to top it. When you get up to 9,000, 10,000 feet, even the mules have to stop overnight to catch their breath, as it were. No oxygen there, less and less. So everyone acclimatized so they can reach that 11,000, 12,000, and up to 14,000 feet. These volcanoes out here, if you measure them, I know it's cheating a little bit, if you measure them from the ocean bottom, they're much higher than Everest. You can see how massive these volcanoes that we're living on here on the Big Island are. From the ocean bottom, they just have gone from the ocean bottom way above the ocean, 15,000 feet above the ocean. Underneath, there's a lot more bulk to them. So that's very high in the air, in other words. So if you're very high in the air of spiritual thinking, then you're going to have to acclimatize to it. So I'm saying this teaching, Adhyaropa Apavada, let's just see how hard it is for people to recognize that the world isn't real. Should it be that hard to admit that it's always changing? What's the difficulty there? Because science knows this. They study the change. And then they begin to think that the world is real. By the change is real. That Maya sucks them in. The appearance of the world, O Ram, is due to it being experienced through hundreds of births, devoid of yogic discrimination. The discerning soul will pass beyond mere enjoyments then and secure these 3 great attainments: knowledge of truth, dissolution of the mind, effacement of desires. As how Lord Vasishta, whom we just read, came down to earth and helped the avatar of the age 3 ages ago so that we could all be helped. And he was schooled in what Maya is going to feel like before he left home and came out. So that's the first line, and Sri Ramakrishna has repeated this in this age. By living many births in Maya, people begin to think the world's real. So I'm just saying then, as you look at the dynamics of Viveka, you can see how it sounds simple, and maybe from the standpoint of a practitioner who's heard the truth and accepted it, it is more simple. Because the acceptance is a kind of nadi you've opened up. You don't have these resistances up, closed down, like I own this kind of resistance. This is my knowledge. It's this way, it's only my way and no other way. My opinion's the only right opinion. My watch keeps the only right time. That's not just religion. People have political watches, they have military watches, they have ancestral watches, and they all think that. Each of those watches, they just put them on and think, my watch keeps the right time. I had to reset my G-Shock for the first time since I got it, years and years and years ago. It stayed but I had a fall and jarred it, you see. So, hey, that's not right, so I reset it, see. So Ramakrishna said, always set your watch to the sundial. That's if you can't see the sun, like in Portland, Oregon. So if you can see the sun, then you can set everything to the sundial in the sun, and you've got the right time all the time. But otherwise, you're setting your watch in the midst of change, and everything is that's the truth you've accepted, conventional. So this is Ajaropa, as I'm talking about. When you get to Viveka, you say, oh, you say that I have to make a distinction, wheat and chaff kind of thing. I can see that. What's it consist of? Recognizing that there's a difference between the eternal and the non-eternal. Okay, well then what's the non-eternal? Everything. Here. Everything that the eyes can see, the ears can hear, the tongue can taste, the nose can smell, the hands can feel. Everything that the senses experience is changing, isn't it? And you haven't made that conclusion yet? And you haven't found out how to find things that are not changing so much? Like back in the Tanmatras, from where the 5 elements came from? Back in the enjoyment of the senses? The senses are one thing, but what they enjoy is godlike. And it becomes more godlike and more divine if the senses change places with the subtle senses. As if you trade the outer senses in for the inner senses, that would be Tripura Sundari's second city. Now I'm living inside. So my eyes aren't seeing, my ears aren't hearing, my tongue isn't tasting, except from inside. And all of this outside is just an add-on. In fact, my food tastes better, I breathe better, and so forth and so on, because I'm living in my internal senses. And so you're just trading off one set for another. It's like putting on new clothes. So all of this around Adyaropa, see, how to convince somebody that everything's a false superimposition over one reality, that there is only one reality and everything else is falsely superimposed at this point by your own mind. You haven't even got to the collective mind yet, and how it foists upon billions and billions of souls in a samsaric wheel, false superimposition. Heaven is not Brahman, in other words. Your ancestors have not gone to enlightenment. And so Vedanta is beginning to give you sobering news that maybe some of the other religions in their dualistic or even fundamentalist leanings have not even begun to fathom. So this is how important having possession of something like this is. Getting the sort of discrimination from the mothers so you can cut through things that are ancestors thick, that are 3 worlds thick. And, dreaming at night doesn't take you outside of those 3 worlds yet. And so, how can I say I've gotten off the cycle of rebirth and I'm not coming back next lifetime? Some of my students say, no children for us, and not coming back next time. This is it, the last lifetime. And I'm thinking inside myself, well, I hope they're right. I mean, because I'm a leader to no one. I can't convince anyone of anything. Everyone has their own lives. All I can do is just share the Dharma with you. And then you have to do what you do with it. So, and it's the same for great teachers, sadhikas, and sadhikas and tzaddiks, much higher and greater than I am, like our great souls that we follow. They couldn't convince people either. So I'm supposed to feel bad about that? So, if you can plant a seed of doubt, you know what I'm talking about, right? The 3 pillars of Zen. One of them is called the Great Doubt. And so Buddhism starts off with doubt, much like this. See, if you say, this world that you cling to, this oyster that you love. The world is my oyster. I'm messing with that now, you see. I'm going to tell you something that might mess with that. Are you ready? Here, sit down, as they say, you see. Are you ready for this? Because it could knock you over and make you real, you see. If not immediately, as you entertain it lately, it's something like the Guru gave you, and like Vasishta did, Brahma did to Lord Vasishta, He did it through a touch, but what if it's just a drop of acid in your mind? Via a word, you see, from some teacher, all of a sudden it caused you to doubt everything that you've ever believed in. And then how is the teacher going to stand behind that and convince people that they need to go on examining deeper with that bit of acid called truth that they just received? That they're never going to get a drop like that in many lifetimes again. And forgetfulness is just ready. We were talking today about how people go into little closets in the church with the priest, you see. Well, I want to confess my sins with you. So a person who hasn't confessed for years goes into a church, goes into, can I confess to you, Father, goes into there, and does the confession and comes out feeling great, you see. Fine, I got it off my shoulders. I was thinking, boy, there's a God blog for me. Because in India, Sri Ramakrishna said, the Hindus, they think that they can go to the Ganges River and get purified, right? Well, that's nice, real nice. And so they go to the river and they get in. So as they walk through the town to get to the Ganges River, they've got all these vultures on their shoulders, called sins, you see. Misdeeds, karmas we call them in India. Because there's no real word for sin in Sanskrit, the way it's meant in other religions. So they've got all these vultures on their shoulder, and as soon as the vultures see the Ganges River coming, they take off. They're out of there, you see. But they just sit in a nearby tree and watch the bathing go on, you see. So the guy gets in, or the girl, and they bathe, and they're feeling great. They get out, I've purified, you see, all my sins are gone. Believing in what the dualistic scriptures tell you and what the priests are telling you, see. Oh, do your ablutions all the time. And then they get out of the river, and then you probably guessed what happened. As soon as they get out and get far enough away, the vultures leave the trees and perch on their shoulders again. And you could say, well, go back again tomorrow. And that's ritualism. See, that's what people do. They fall into dualistic ritualism. And they think that's enough to get them heaven. But the sins are, the transgressions are collecting all the time. You never go to the root of them and expiate them so that you can be free. So this is 3 worlds thick, as I said. And many lifetimes in 3 worlds thick, that you're going to have to convince people, like say in a Western country like this, that here's the truth you've been wanting to know, but can you accept it and can you work it in? And that's the beginning, to convince them that there's a wool been pulled over their eyes. A ruse has been pulled by this insentient power called Maya, and the mind needs to divorce from it. You are never in Maya. Maya is in you, so get rid of it. You've allowed it to come, as Vivekananda said. So that's Viveka with its concomitant of Adhyaropa. Next to that is Apavada, refutation of the misconception that you've fallen into. And so you could see that you can recognize it. Now you have to decide, is that true, what they're telling me? What my teacher's telling me? What Vedanta's telling me? And I'm holding this many lifetimes thick misconception around things. And how quick can I disperse with that? Is my faith strong enough? Is the great doubt deep enough? The pillar dug deep enough in the subconscious mind to disperse all of those karmas and those past lifetimes of misconceptions. without stirring up the silt of the mind, you might say. And so, if the tale is told, then, if it is deep enough and the soul is strong enough, then that's where vairagya comes in 12 levels, they say. I have that chart for you next week. 12 levels of detachment. You can see it happening to people, like in 12 stages. From meek to middling to intense to absolute. You meet some people or read of some people like monastics and so forth. It's like intense, their renunciation. That's why it impresses people in the householder partition of things. Wow, I just saw a person who doesn't have anything and knows everything and suffers nothing and owns nothing too. Now that has to impress you, especially if you're a seeker. Even in a beginning stage, it has to impress you when you see someone like that. What to speak of a whole field of them. Hundreds and thousands of monks that I was surrounded by on many occasions in my youth. So basically, put yourself there and hope it rubs off on you, you see. So that when the misconception of it all comes, you can just say, they did it, I can do it too. They did it and it's working for them. And they're getting free of ritualism. They're getting free of religious convention. They're getting free of being reborn again on earth with families. And this is why I say when I talk about discrimination in terms of birth, life, death, and rebirth, separate that apart from eternal life, which is Brahman, then that's when discrimination becomes more important in this age. That in order to free yourself from the tyranny of your ancestors, to quote Vivekananda, the tyranny of your ancestors, which is thousands of years long now, that you're going to have to make that kind of a deep discriminating move on Maya, you see. Get the sword first, then march toward it, cut it away. And then you'll be in a good state for vairagyam. This diver here is diving deep into the ocean of God's beauty. It's probably there somewhere, that poem. Dive deep into the ocean of God's beauty. If you descend to the othermost depths, there you'll find the gems of love, like on the ocean floor. So those four treasures are there, as you can see. Viveka, vairagya, shat sampati. That word sampati, incomparable word in Sanskrit for balance and evenness. And at the bottom there, almost ghost-like, like a pirate's treasure, mumukshutvam, which is what I chanted this morning at the beginning of this class. Mumukshurvai sharnam ham prapadje. Prapadje, the feet of. I take refuge at the feet of Brahman. To gain liberation, because I have a strong desire for liberation from bondage, from ignorance, from suffering. Mumukshutvam. And that's just what has to happen before mukti. You see, mumukshutvam, strong desire for it, then mukti, you get it. And this is an acid test in the mind. This is a Vedantic practice that doesn't exist anywhere else. Even the words for it are esoteric and hidden, aren't they? What did you say that again? What's that word? Avidya, Viveka, vairagya, moksha, mukti. I don't know what that means. It's all Greek to me. No, it's all Sanskrit to you. Let's forget about the Greeks and the Romans for a while. They didn't make it. You need a culture that went the entire way to formlessness and has thousands of souls to prove it. So give up your dalliance with old narrow ways of thinking. See, open up new roads into the universal and accept this great truth that's upon you. If you caught a glimpse of it, you may have to catch your balance for a few years. center yourself again. And as you do go through those few years, you're going to have to go through your past lifetimes with your ancestors. It's called emotions right now that people are going through. And coming to know about things like gunic cycles and karmic cycles is going to be put upon you to learn, so that you can be ready for this. You never know when it's going to strike. Until you're totally out of that dirty game, it's like you'll never be totally out of the dirty game as long as you have anything to do with politics. As soon as you renounce politics and go away, then you have a chance of being clean. And it's the same with liberation and bondage. Until you can entirely get rid of this idea that Maya is real, that Vasishta is trying to teach even the young avatar, the one thing he couldn't get by when he was young, Shridam, you see, was that presence of Maya. And you had to see through it, so that he wouldn't have any emotions or sentimentalism around people who suffer, because then he wouldn't be able to help them if he did. You have to be transcendent of it in order to be of real help. You can't be a part of your ancestors, like, oh, I think I'm going to go help them, but you're still a part of the problem, because Maya is still in you. So get yourself free, get your freedom, and then return to the castle, like Ram and Buddha did, and do the best work. Then there's no doubt about it. You get free. So why? Because you have satsampati. You'll go through the rest of this fairly quickly in this first half. Samo dhammo puriti titiksha samadhamma shraddha. If you want. In so many beautiful ways it's told to us. And one of those beautiful ways is, of course, bhajans, they're called. Much better and deeper than just kirtan, because these have a powerful message for you. Devotional wisdom songs, they're called. This one was a favorite of Sri Ramakrishna, and the young Narayan, Swami Vivekananda, used to sing it to him. He'd say, when he saw Narayan, he'd say, please sing that song about returning to your own abode. That is, leaving Maya and returning to your Atman, your true nature. Mono chalo nija viketane, mono chalo nija viketane, shamshara videshe videshir veshe Brahmokhe no akarane, mono chalo nija niketane. O mind, return to your own abode, your eternal home within. You are a foreigner in this foreign land called Earth. Why do you roam about it aimlessly, with no real purpose? The 5 senses and the 5 elements, these are all different from you. None of them belong to you. Why have you become senseless in your attachment to others and forgotten your own inner true nature? And the song goes on saying, there's the road of life, basically. There's a home there for restless souls who called Guru and Guru's ashram, and you go there, you see, and you inquire inside of how how the path is ahead, see how you get to your goal and so forth. And they'll tell you, well, you're going to need to keep the riches of Sama, Dhamma, Upariti, Titiksha, Samadhana, Shraddha, and all of the 6 jewels with you. So the 4 treasures maybe you have, the first 2 of them, and you're now having to keep your wealth, you see, of these along this path, because there are highway robbers called lust, greed, anger, envy, jealousy, pride, delusion, and 9 obstacles, and 5 kleshas, and how safe can life be when all of these things are there? So return to your own abode, your eternal home, and inquire along the way of these pitfalls on the path. So you could think back on Swami Vivekananda as a teenager, just loving to be in the presence of Sri Ramakrishna, and Sri Ramakrishna asks him to sing, and he picks up the tambura and sings this, Mono chalo nija nikatane, O mind, return to your eternal abode, so your eternal home. That's called Shiva, the home of peace. So inner peace, self-control, self-settledness, forbearance, concentration, and faith. You'll get these things as an essence after you have Viveka and Vairagya. If you don't have Viveka Vairagya, people will be looking for these things and they'll never get them in an essence. It's sort of like, I taste my food, and I'm enjoying it, but I don't know the tanmatras. See, so I can't really understand the rasa that I'm getting from food. Some people can't even understand the nutrients they're getting from food, because maybe they're not getting any, because their food hasn't been blessed and it's not pure and so forth. But there's another level of essence here. See, is that people are trying for concentration, not getting it. People trying to forbear the ills of the world, not doing it. People are striving for faith, never arriving at it, uninterrupted. And they're trying for inner peace, and it's not sticking with them, like snow on a wet road. So if you have Viveka Vairagya in place and you try for the Shat Sampati, the 6 jewels are inside those 2 treasures. So you just open them up and gather them to yourself. And then when you have strong faith, then mumukshutva mokam. Probably until you really have faith in the triple gem, Guru path and Guru Dharma and Sangha, basically they call it, or Buddha Dharma Sangha in Tibetan. We really have that strong triple gem. It's a nice comparison, the 6 jewels and the 3 gems. Then you can get a strong desire for liberation. At that point, pretty much, there's no falling back. So that's a criterion. So we often look at this. So somebody comes up to you from another religion. Maybe they're curious and want to know why you're so peaceful, or maybe they want to prove their religion's better than yours, whatever the case. I say, what's your faith, sir or madam? My faith is called Shraddha. It's based on being able to concentrate on the Lord. And that's based upon my being able to forbear the ills of the world. And that's based upon my ability to be self-settled and balanced. And that's based upon self-control of my senses and objects. That's based upon inner peace I got from detaching from things that were unreal because I practiced discrimination. So you just take it backwards. There's my faith. What's yours? And you'll find out quite often that theirs is belief. And the description like that shakes their belief. And you'll be able to tell whether or not they're going to say, will you teach me that? Or whether they're going to say, my watch keeps the right time, yours doesn't. A few quotes and we can end the first half. Queen Chudala says, and she was a great meditator, if the desire for wealth is abandoned thoroughly through asceticism, then ajnana, ignorance, will persist. But if such desire be transcended through viveka, it will disappear. So this path is called Neti-Neti, right? When you're at this level of things and you want to completely clear the field of your mind from misconceptions or misfiances or tendrils of doubt, that you want to inspect everything through Neti-Neti and take the ground out from under it. This is why the 6 jewels are essences, because they're not floating on any ground except Brahman. That is the ground of Brahman. And it's not the ground of the mind field anymore. The mind has its own field. And Brahman is boundaryless, borderless. And all that's true and real rests in Brahman. And everything that doesn't has no real existence. That's why you started out with Viveka to begin with, isn't it? To find out the difference, the distinction. So if ajnana is still there, that is the opposite of jnana, if ignorance is still persisting in these forms, then and there's still some work to be done in order to clear that field of misconceptions, which are unreal to begin with. Ignorance is not real, so how can it cause you any real doubt? Abhidhamma says. The beautiful way, think about that, you see. The very ignorance upon which I'm basing all my assumptions and conclusions is not real. So the doubt that comes from those things is even less real. So I should probably, in reverse order, get rid of each of those. See, if I have to do doubt first, get to root ignorance, get rid of root ignorance, and I can start over, basically. I'm back on square one, and that's a good thing. Vashishta, whom we just started this class reading about, poor guy who got put in the curse of Maya by his father and then brought out, says, the study of Atmagyan books, the grace of a guru, ceaseless practice of vairagyam, and freeing oneself from desires for the world, when all these are attained and meditation on Brahman is engaged in, prana and mind will more readily come under your control. Basically, those two things are paramount in the assessment of both yoga and Vedanta. Get your prana under control if it's not. If your mind is under control, don't worry about the prana, because if you came in here with a pure mind, then you don't have erratic prana. Have you ever met anyone like that? Steady all the time, stationary, healthy all the time, breathes well. King Janaka-like, drinks his milk from a brimming cup, and was started out that way, like Shankara illumined when he was 6. And we don't even know what happened when he was 2, 3, 4, and 5. So, if you find yourself having problems in Vedanta, they won't send you to a bunch of asanas, or a therapist, or a doctor for some pills. See, let's get your prana flowing again. Breathe. Let's see how many of these go away just with that simple exercise. Just do that regimen for a while. Be yourself again. Positive mind comes from breathing, and your depressions will go away. I'm working recently with a couple of people who just chronic depression. There's no way to help them. I've tried everything. Of course, I don't go for pills and things like that. So we're trying to do this in the right way. But so they can't even breathe. I can't even do that. Can you read a little of the scripture? Can't do it. I just can't make my mind do it. See? Can you say a mantra? No, I can't concentrate. Can't. Can you breathe for me? Let's just sit and breathe together. But you'd have to be there in the same room with them to get them to do that, for that to be effective. And it'd only be effective for a few minutes, because as soon as you left the room, scum of Maya comes dancing back on the lake. See? They can't keep it away. They don't have any muscles for keeping it away. But to speak of huge muscles, I mean, this is Viveka Vairagya, right? You're armed with the greatest muscles in the world. And you're strong, and what'll come afterwards is that very strength of character that you need. So we'll end with Vivekananda's quote here, the first half. Advance towards liberation is the worthiest gain of mankind. May you speedily attain to freedom and help others attain to it as well. So here's our contemporary voice in all of this. We've talked about Ram, and we've talked about Vashishta, and we've talked about Shankara, and mentioned Jesus. But here's, on the scene, the great soul, Vivekananda, with us here. And so he's telling you, just like Holy Mother did tell him, Sri Ramakrishna's noble consort, that Ramakrishna is here. He'll be here for another 150, 200 years to help you if you call on him. Now, move towards him and help others along the way as you do. So here's where the highest wisdom and meditation come together with wisdom and selfless action into the 4 yogas. So here, let's end our first half, take a break, and then we will go forward on to the second half in about 15 minutes.